Today's guest has spent 16 years helping companies double their revenue, and he'll tell you the reason they stall has nothing to do with working harder.
Every organization stalls when the leader of operations has hit their capacity.
He came out of applied sociology research at Princeton and Penn and built a framework around the one thing he says every growing company is missing.
Everyone knows that to build a house, you need an architect. The architect's role is not to set the vision, and the architect's role is not to build the house.
A $20 million company called him in after 3 straight years stuck at the same revenue. They thought they had a sales problem.
I'm pretty sure that by now, your team is some of the best salesmen and marketers on the planet. That's not your problem. Your problem is not sales and marketing. Your problem is architectural leadership.
What changes when structure replaces chaos, and the question that keeps him building.
Why not see how good you can become? Why not? And I believe that. So why not? Let's see how far we can go. Let's see how much we can do. Let's see how many organizations we can help.
Anthony Dickerson, welcome to Lead to Scale. Welcome to our show, Lead to Scale. This podcast is sponsored by Algo AI Partners. We help consulting and service-based firms scale using smart AI solutions. If you want to book a free consultation to find out more, click the link in the description of the show below. Today, I'm joined by Anthony, CEO of Foundations Business Consulting. Anthony has spent more than 16 years helping growth-stage companies, especially in that 1 to 10 million range, unlock serious momentum, often doubling the revenue within the year. What makes his work distinct is that he doesn't just bring inspiration, he installs structure. As part of this, he is a creator of the architectural leadership, a framework that bridges the gap between visionary ambition and operational execution by building what he calls the company beneath the company. Before launching the Foundations, Anthony worked in applied sociology and led research initiatives at Princeton and the University of Pennsylvania. He later served as VP of Operations, grounding his consulting philosophy in lived operational reality. Anthony, welcome to Lead to Scale. For those meeting you for the first time, why don't you introduce yourself in your own words?
Thanks so much, Usama. It's great to be here. Yes, you got it right. My company is Foundations Business Consulting, and we do practice something called architectural leadership. You know, what we have discovered over the years is that there's a missing element. Most organizations are well aware of what we call visionary leadership. Usually that's the CEO or the president of the organization. They carry the direction, they carry the vision for the organization. And then there's the operations. They're the ones who are supposed to put that vision into action and cause the company to move forward. But what's often missing is that middle piece called what I call architectural leadership. So what we do is we take that vision of the visionary and we develop systems, processes, so that those in operations can now do that work that the visionary has called them to do. And as you said, we've had tremendous success over these 16 years. We do have many companies that we work with who double their revenue within 1 year. In fact, one of the later companies I work with, I started working with them probably a little more than a year ago, back last January, and they have tripled their revenue. So it's not a magic formula. All it really is now we've put structure where there was chaos. And it's unbelievable what that structure does. So we've been doing this for a while now, and it's been a real blessing to us to be able to help the organizations that we're able to help. And we hope a blessing to that organization so that not only are they increasing their revenue, but their strategic planning, the culture of the organization, everything about the organization changes when we apply those aspects of architectural leadership.
I really appreciate you taking the time to sort of share the inspiration for what that looks like and sort of some of the lived experiences you had. Now, before we get into that, and I promise the listeners that we will, I want to take us a step back. You began your sort of journey in applied sociology, research at Princeton and UPenn. How did that path first open up for you?
Well, it's a great question. So I was in my 20s and wanted to figure out what did I want to do after college, after undergraduate school. So I applied for a position. I applied for a program and a master's degree in applied sociology, I thought that what I wanted to do was do research. I always enjoyed research, and I always enjoyed sociology. And applied sociology it's a pretty concentrated field, and it's not much more you can do besides research. And I was very fortunate when I finished my degree that a position opened up at Princeton University, and I got the job there. So I realized at the time that if you want to do research, certainly Princeton is one of the best places to do it. What we did research on AIDS prevention among minority youth. So my job there was the project manager. Then from there, actually, the professor I was working with, John Jamat, he moved to the University of Pennsylvania, and he took us with him. That's how I got to both organizations. But my job was as the program manager over our largest grant. We had about 800 kids in the grant, so my job was really to do the whole thing. First I had to, it was my job to choose the location. We could have picked any city in America, but thankfully we were able to pick, Philadelphia, which was certainly close by and where the University of Pennsylvania is. Then my job was to contact the superintendent of schools to see if we could get permission to do this project within the Philadelphia school system. I'd say the best thing about that time was that I was young. At the time I was in my late 20s, and I didn't understand what a difficult challenge this would be. The last thing, Usama, school districts want is for any large research organization to do research with their kids, right? It just doesn't have a good sound to it, right? It doesn't. So I didn't know that, though. I thought it was like, no big deal. Turns out it was a pretty big deal, but it was very enjoyable. So I got the permission. We went to the principals, talked to them. My job was to recruit the kids, to get them all to the building. We had buses to pick the kids up. We paid the kids just a small stipend for their time in the research program as well. So it was great. And while I was there, so it was working there that I knew I loved research, but working there I started to understand that I enjoy the business side as well, right? Not only in research itself, there's really two sides. There's the research side and there's the administrative side. So my job there was not only to do all the work, but also to work with all the students getting their PhD. One of the advantages of a school like University of Pennsylvania or Princeton University is that they got to learn the other side as well, which was my side, the practical administrative side, that we're not only crunching numbers, but we actually have to put all this stuff together. And that's where I really understood, I really enjoy putting all this stuff together. I really enjoy seeing how all this works and doing it well. So after I left there, I joined a small consulting firm and worked there just so I could understand what this meant, right? How do I really do this? And I was there for probably around a year or so. And then eventually I started putting these practices of consulting in my jobs after that. A few years of that, and then I started Foundation Business Consulting in 2010. And it was from there working, so I'm working foundations and I'm working also at a job for much of that time, just continually learning and being able to apply my thinking around how to help organizations thrive. All that thinking, all that research, all that practical experience became what I call architectural leadership, which is an entire framework of how to take that vision and to implement it through the operations team. My work has primarily been in operations, but it has been a tremendous journey, tremendous ride, but that's the as short as I can make it version of how I got from there to here.
No, I appreciate that. I really appreciate you sharing about what drew you to the business systems and operations from academia. I mean, fun fact, very similar that I was in academia and I made my pivot into the business systems and
Right.
operations side of it. So I always like to sort of pick on that a little bit. In the early days of foundations, I mean, you've been in business for 16 years now. That's huge. Congratulations. I think you recently had your anniversary as well. So, congratulations on hitting that milestone of 16 years plus.
Thank
In
you.
the early days, when this was more part-time and involving like that foundation business consulting, you mentioned that you had a couple of stints here and there that sort of helped shape your consulting lens, if you will. Share a little bit about what were you learning about consulting that shaped how you operate today?
It was in the beginning. In the beginning of my consulting, I used to work with organizations for about 6 months at a time, and that 6 month period was not only to analyze what they're doing, but to really understand the ins and outs of what's going on. So I did about 2 6 months stints at two different organizations, and the same thing happened at the end of both. So I'm there for 6 months. I'm helping out. I'm working. I'm doing some consulting, and at the end, I talked to the CEOs about these are, let's just call it, these are the 10 things that we've been adjusting and that we want to continue to adjust. And now that my time is over, either I continue on or you should really work on these areas. And the CEOs would look at the list and they'd say, oh, that's very interesting. And they would maybe pick two things that they thought were important, and then the rest they would ignore. And you better believe there were always the two things that would have the least benefit for them, but were the easiest for them to implement, right? And after that, I said, oh, okay, wow, this is, I'm doing this wrong, right? It shouldn't just be my observation and telling them about it, but I need to have them more involved in the process. So it was from that learning that I started putting together what I now call my trainings and my workshops, right? Because the people who are in the organization need to really understand what's going on, what the choices are of how we can change things, and what will happen if we don't change things. So that's one experience that really helped me to build my framework, to help organizations not just to pick and choose what they think is good, but to understand holistically what's going on and help them along the way. Organizations need help along the way, and that's what we do. They don't need help. They don't need the same help all the time. That help needs to transition as they transition. But it helped me to become a better consultant. That's one example.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. I was going to say, to me, what I hear from this is almost there's a lot of weight and value to an outside-in perspective. And the examples that you shared, where you give them the list, they would pick what's relevant for them, is I think a very beautiful representation of where that outside-in perspective may not have translated or been internalized at the client's level, and now they apply their lens, their
Right.
their worldview of what's important, what's not.
Right.
And like you said, surprise, surprise, it didn't really work out the way they thought because they cherry picked based on sort of their
Right.
biases or their conceptions.
So the key there, my failing, and I think a lot of consulting's failing, is that they don't help their clients to see clearly what we see, right? So by training, by doing the workshops, what happens is that they now see the whole picture, and we can help shape their view towards the reality that must exist in order for them to be successful. And what really happens is that instead of it being my idea, it becomes their idea. That was the key. That's what really needed to shift. It needed to shift from them thinking, "Oh, this is what Anthony thinks," to them thinking, "This is what I think." And once it's their idea, now they're willing to implement it.
That's very fascinating. I find it even more so fascinating because that's very reflective of human nature, right? When
Yeah.
someone's being told what to do, there's a lot of resistance. We'll sort of open up and reframe that conversation of let's ideate together, let's partner or collaborate on this. Suddenly, there's a
Yes.
lot more ownership that comes around. And I have to say, in my consulting days too, I think that's one of the biggest differentiators I've noticed in ideas being respected and sort of taken all the way from ideation through execution versus it just sort of, sitting on the shelf collecting dust. I really appreciate you sharing this. I'm curious, one personal question for you. What motivates you personally to be doing this for the last 16 plus years?
Well, I believe that all of us have special gifts, right? Those gifts are all different depending on who we are, how we grew up, and from my perspective, how God created us to be. And I was created to be one who can see what's happening behind the scenes, perhaps a little bit better than most. So when I enter an organization, it's very, very quick for me to see if you continue to do this, this is going to be your result, right? So this behavior produces this result. So it's easy and it's fun for me to get in there and try and shape different behaviors, right? It's our behaviors that promote the results. And I've always had a spirit about me to want to help people to be all they can be, to be successful in every way possible. So I'm motivated because I can help the organization and I can help the people. You probably know, Usama, that there are different stats on this, but somewhere between 70, 80, 90% of people hate their jobs. That's too much. That's too many, right? But it's a lot of people that dislike their jobs. But often what's happening in their jobs is it might actually be a career that they enjoy, but the culture of the organization might be all jacked up. What the organization emphasizes. So we have to help people to see how to have healthy environments for everyone. And it's amazing what happens. In architectural leadership, what happens is we do get the right people in the right seats, and we get the right people doing things in areas where they're strong in, right? When anyone is in a position where they can do the things that they enjoy, that they thrive with, where they're going to enjoy their job better. But when we've got a round peg trying to go into a square hole, it's not going to work for anybody, and it's never going to work, right? It's never going to work. And some of the things that organizations do that perhaps they think it's more profitable, it's not more profitable because everybody hates it. We need to turn some things around. We need to change our behavior. We need to change the way we do things so that we can start making more money and people can enjoy their time there at work more.
Yeah, you've lived both the research and the real-world operations angle of this, which I find really cool because it makes your framework have a very practical lens, and especially the way you describe it. So let's dive into this architectural leadership itself. And I want to come back to what you just mentioned about culture, because earlier you mentioned process and systems, and culture is, if we were to use a framework, people, process, systems, people, process, tech, it's a very classical way of doing it. Culture is one of those soft pieces that informs the people, but also touches on the processes and systems. And I think it'd be really cool to dissect that a little bit. But before I get ahead of myself, for someone hearing this for the first time, what is architectural leadership?
Well, architectural leadership is a model that I created that has several elements to it. Now, the main element, the one that people remember the most and is really the foundation of it, is architectural leadership is a model that takes the vision of the visionary and develops a system, develops processes so that the operations team can do that vision. For instance, the example that I always give is a visionary is building a house. The visionary understands directionally what he or she wants that house to look like, what the rooms are going to be used for in that house, and he or she says, okay, operations team, workers, build that house for me. The operations team, they're excited about doing the work of the organization, and they buy materials, and they start building. And then the visionary comes, and the visionary says, oh no, that's not what I wanted. No, it should be bigger. It should be smaller. No, this room should be over there. And this is what happens in almost every organization. I do not exaggerate. Almost every organization, the visionaries will say something like, I need better people. I need people who can follow instructions. I need people who are dedicated. I need people who want to work. I mean, this is extremely common. And then the operations side, they say, our visionary, he or she is crazy. They want too much. They want the world. They want us to work too fast. And I say, no, the visionary does not need to slow down. And the operations people are not lazy, and they're not unable to do the work. What's missing in that scenario I just talked about is the blueprint, right? You can't, everyone knows that to build a house, you need an architect. The architect's role is not to set the vision, and the architect's role is not to build the house. The architect role is to build a blueprint that takes the owner's vision, the CEO's vision, the president's vision, and turns it into something that the operations team can now use in order to build the house the way that the visionary wants the house built. So that's primarily what we do at Foundations. We are the ones who build that blueprint for you. But in addition to that, architectural leadership, the whole of architectural leadership is a little bit more as well. In addition to building that blueprint, we also look at the people. So I developed something called the Apex Work Style Architecture. What Apex is a behavioral assessment tool that helps us understand how do people react under pressure, right? So that we can know where they're suited for and where they're not suited for in the organization. Sometimes people have to switch jobs. Sometimes, as the organization grows especially, and I've worked with several organizations that when you go, for instance, from $2 million to $4 million within 1 year, a lot about your organization changes, including now at first you had maybe a director of operations, and now you need a COO. Well, who in the organization is qualified to be the COO? Sometimes someone who is good when the organization is small can't handle the capacity as the organization gets larger. So Apex lets us know how do people operate under pressure and who on the team is best able to handle that role. And I've helped several organizations as they were growing to hire that COO for the first time. Right? So in addition to Apex, we look and see what systems need to be developed. So we use the Foundations operating assessment. The operating assessment is an assessment that I go through with the leadership, and we understand what you're doing in each of these operations categories. Some things you may be doing well, some things you may not be doing well. My approach, Usama, is to bring you to a world-class standard. It is not, you're not just okay. You can't just be okay, because any of us who are okay, we do something called go out of business, right? We have to be exceptional at what we do. We can't just be okay at what we do. So the Foundation's operating, the Foundation's operating assessment helps me to determine where you are in each of these operations areas. And sometimes you have the people who have the skill set in order to bring you to a world-class level. Sometimes what I have to do is take those people maybe through some trainings, right? That's why I developed about 30 different trainings over the years that take people from mediocre to world-class. And depending on the needs of the organization, depending on what comes out in the assessment, we take people through these areas as well. You don't need new staff. They may need training, and we're here to help them with that training as well. And we also are here to help them to put the processes in place so that they're able to do their job better. So it's really all these elements that come together. We also work with the culture of the organization. We talked about culture, but there are cultural things that must be fixed in some organizations. I'll just give you one quick example. One organization I worked with had over 100 people in the organization. And of the people who quit or got fired, about 90% of them were quit or were fired under one leader. There were about 6 or 7 leaders in the organization. So if 90% of the people are quitting or being fired under one leader, then the culture of the organization stinks, at least under that leader, right? And really that has spread, it spread beyond that leader and throughout the organization as well. So we have to do things that will help that leader to become a better leader for sure. But also, if these are things that the rest of the organization tolerates, we need to take a look at that, because if people can be happy with their job, if their job is safe, if their job is a place that cares for them, then people will want to stay. And you know what happens, Usama? People do a better job when they're happy. There is no magic formula to many of the clients who I work with doubling their revenue. What it is now we've put systems in place, now we have people in the right positions, now we've helped the culture of the organization, and now we have an overall blueprint for how they are to do their work. And these are the things that make the difference.
I got you. I really appreciate you taking and walking us through the different pieces that you sort of touch in and how your trainings and workshops really come together. I am curious, before any of these training pieces come through, I'm actually curious to hear your sort of thesis here. Why do you think so many companies, between that 1 to 10 mil range that you try to work with, but I think you and I are both in agreement that it extends beyond that as well.
It does.
They scale without this, let's call it the blueprint, like that translational piece, that architectural piece. Why do you think so many companies, try to scale without that?
Well, that is an excellent question. That is probably the question, right? That is the best question that you can ask. What happens in every organization is that the visionary, the leader of the organization, he or she is the one that has taken the organization from 0 to 1 million, from 0 to 5 million, from 0 to 10 million. But the organizations, every organization stalls when the leader when the leader of operations has hit their capacity. Every organization stalls, without exception. So when that visionary leader, who is perhaps the world's best visionary, when they or the people on their team who are overseeing operations, because when you start off, the visionary has to do everything. You just have to do what you have to do. We all know that. Any of us who started a company know there's some things I really love about my job, and there's some things I don't love about my job. But you know what? I have to do all of them if I want the organization to grow. And then when it grows and we're able to hire more people, well, great. But in every organization, when that cap has been maxed, when they reach the level of competency in their operations, the organization stalls. But what happens is that same visionary, they believe, well, I got us this far, so it's up to me to get us further, right? I talked to one president of a fairly large company. At the time, they were over $20 million. And I was talking to him about what are some things that you've been doing, because they had been stuck at the same revenue for about 3 years in a row. And before that, they had grown substantially every year. So I was asking him, what is it that you've done in order to break this barrier? And he explained to me, well, we did more sales and more marketing, right? More sales and more marketing. We had more sales and more marketing training. And I told him, I said, I'm pretty sure that by now, your team is some of the best salesmen and marketers on the planet. That's not your problem. Your problem is not sales and marketing. Your problem is architectural leadership, right? It's getting that vision that you have for the operations team to be doing that. Now, when I started working with them, and we had to do a lot of training in their operations, because they had focused so much on their core capacity. Of course, they were very good at their core capacity, because you don't get to $20 million if you're not very good at your core capacity. But all the other areas, the IT, the HR, the finance, and all the other areas of their operations were not, their facilities. It just wasn't going well. But once we strengthened those areas, now, I think this was several years ago. This was probably 5 or 6 years ago. But now, in my talking to the CEO, they're up to close to somewhere between 35 and $40 million. They're up to now, because we had to strengthen those areas that were holding them back, because they had reached the capacity of their operations. They could not go any further. They were stuck. But once we were able to go in there, do the proper trainings, do the proper assessments, work on the culture of the organization, now they're able to thrive to the next level.
That's really interesting, because when you say this, what I hear, especially how you say that when they reach their capacity, I almost hear that I think it's really important to have the human behind the business be discussed. That part's really important. When you mention hit their capacity, it's almost as if it's not just their operational or their visionary, it's the self-awareness of what they think they can do and what they think is needed to be done versus what is actually needed. And that starts to have a little bit of a disconnect, because they've been doing whatever they've been doing to grow from 0 to 1, 0 to 5.
Yeah, right.
And the common assumption is, well, I just got to keep doing this to go from 5 to 10 or whatever it may be.
Right.
So that's really interesting, where it comes to this, growth mindset, recognizing what the limitations are. And I also sometimes think about, well, is there really any way of solving this permanently at the ground level? And sometimes I think, well, maybe not, because if I'm the owner-operator, naturally all the things that consume my time are going to create the scenario where I'm going to need outside vision to recognize, hey, I got to operate differently. I need a different operating model, different processes, whatever it may be. That's really cool. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, when we get into the blueprint, you mentioned about different examples of where you're really translating that impact and what you see. I'm curious, when companies implement your blueprint, what changes first? Leadership, clarity, process, system, accountability. What would you say is the order of events that sort of happen? And I recognize that maybe it's different from one company to the next, but in general.
No, I would say the first thing is almost always clarity. Right? You have to understand clearly where you are before we can make adjustments. This is why the assessment is so important. The assessment is, we can't start without the assessment, right? Without the assessment, all we can do is have conversations. We can talk about things, but when we have the assessment, we can have something much more concrete to base our next steps off of. So first, we need clarity around what's going on in the organization, and we need clarity in the leadership's mind to understand we are weak in these areas. And as long as we're weak in these areas, we're not going to move forward. Because sometimes, well, now this part is different. It's usually clarity, but what's different is the leadership's level of understanding and acceptance of that, right? So many organizations think, it is not unusual for an organization to say, we do X really well. And then it turns out after the assessment, no, X is one of the things you do worse. That's one of the worst things that you do around here. Where they think it's really good, but they have the rose-colored glasses on, and they don't have real good clarity around how they are really doing in that area. And sometimes they do need an outside person like us with the right tools in order to let them know how they're really doing and what changes need to be made. And we usually start with, once we do the assessment and we see where you are in all these areas, we'll usually start with the area that you're the worst at, right? That if you're really, really bad over here, let's just start over here, because you're going to see, the organization is going to see the biggest results in the fastest time, because the first thing we want to do is get momentum. We want to get people excited. We want to get people saying, okay, we've made this change, and it's very visible. Because we don't only need the leadership's involvement, we need the team involvement as well. because another thing that one of the other trainings that we do is, for example, supervisor training. I worked with one organization, and just in casual conversation, with one of the supervisors, he was having trouble because one of the people that he supervised needed help. And he said to me in our conversation, "It is not my responsibility to help him with his job." And I said to him, "That is almost all of your responsibility, to help him with his job. So you think it's none of your responsibility. I'm telling you, no, it's your whole job. Your whole job is to help him with his job so that he does well." And this was a revelation, right? He didn't understand this. He thought that his job was simply to monitor, to be sure that this person did the work that they were supposed to do on time, on budget, right? But to actually help this person, it never occurred to him, and it was not at all a part of the culture of this organization. So what we had to do in the entire organization is do supervisor training so that every supervisor in the organization understood what their role is and how to be effective as a supervisor. And because actually one of my books, I wrote a book last year called The World's Worst Supervisor. In part being inspired by the fact that, as you know, Usama, and you might not have thought about this, but you know it when I say that is true, that most supervisors are not promoted because of their competency as a supervisor. They're promoted because of their competency in their work. Right? They do a good job in whatever department that they're in. So a supervisor position is open, and they say, well, let's pick the person who is doing the best job at doing their work. And most supervisors don't get any training, no training. So when we go in and we help supervisors with training, we can do in-person training, we can do coaching, right? When we help them, it is it's a revelation to the supervisor, and it's also a great weight taken off their shoulder, right? They know something's not right, but they don't know what to do about it, and most organizations don't know what to do about it either. But that's another huge part, because the supervisors are the ones that, once we put the systems together, they're the ones who have to oversee it. They're the ones who have to make sure that it's being done. And if they don't have any training, then it's going to hurt the organization. And these are things that, after 16 years of doing this, we understand. It's 16 years, like you said, it's not 16 years of theory. It's 16 years of doing foundations, business consulting, and for much of that time, working in organizations as well. So my perspective is not theoretical. It's extremely practical, because it was my job. I was very fortunate in the organizations that I've worked in. Almost every organization I've worked in, I'm in charge, right? I'm in charge of making sure stuff gets done. So I come about everything I do not based on theory, but based on this stuff works. Because you know what, Osama? A lot of times theory doesn't work. What works is what works. So we do what works instead of just what people who've never really been responsible. We always say, like, when something goes wrong in an organization, whose head gets chopped off? Well, that person was usually my head, right? I didn't want my head chopped off, so I had to figure out a way, how do we do this so we can all be successful? And that's what organizations get when they hire foundations business consulting, as opposed to theoretical firms that think, well, I think this is what I read in a book, and I think this is good, and it may or may not be.
The last piece, and I really like the way you put it, right? The first step to whatever the nature of the problem it is that your client might be facing, it's that clarity. It's getting everyone on that same page that's critical, because then that sets the foundation to move forward. And then the last comment you made there, right, is I'm the one that's responsible. If it doesn't work, I'm the one that's going to be let go. And oftentimes what I've experienced and noticed is really what you're referring to is how are your metrics measured? What are your KPIs, your OKRs, or whatever it may be? How are you being measured against the mandate that you have and the deliverables you need to deliver? And it almost sounds like oftentimes there's a disconnect in that measurement and therefore in that motivation of the individuals to then be able to go and execute against that vision versus against this quote unquote misguided sort of set of metrics.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you sharing that.
There is often a disconnect. You're right, because people do the things that they are most rewarded for, right? So if your organization rewards people for increased revenue, but could care less if the people in your organization are miserable or if they love it there, then you may slightly increase your revenue each quarter. You may. But if you would concentrate on other aspects other than just revenue, then you would substantially increase your revenue each quarter, at least much more substantially than you're doing right now. So it's important that we emphasize the right things. And emphasizing revenue is, of course, important, because if I don't make any revenue, Usama, and if you don't make any revenue, we're out of business. Even nonprofits, I've worked with some nonprofits and explained to them, oh no, you have to make a profit. Don't be confused by the category of your organization, right? You have to make a profit. But we also have to be sure that we're doing these other things that are well.
I appreciate you taking the time to walk through that. I'd like to pivot a little bit, and I'd like to shift to you and foundations right now. I know that in our conversation prior to, you made a mention of how there's scaling plans that are under works. I'm curious, what prompted the shift from being, a solo style operator to building a team-based firm? What prompted that shift?
Well, my main salesman, James, and I were having lunch one day. And this is when he first got involved. He's been working with foundations about 2 years now. And when he first got involved is when it was really just me. But James said over lunch, he said, Anthony, we're going to change the way business is done. And I thought, boy, that's really good, James. I said, that's great. I said, we're going to use that. And yes, I would like to do that. But it didn't take me long to understand. I mean, there's no way that I can change the way business is done, right? I need a team of people. So it could no longer be just me. I had to bring others on board to understand what we do, how we do business. And, incredibly, several of the people on my team are people that I've worked with in the past, right? I've worked in their organization. And when life changed and they had an opportunity, they wanted to come work with me because they love the work that we do so much. So that was the catalyst, really, of me understanding that in order to grow and in order to change the way business is done, I needed to change from a single person to a multi-person organization. But more than that, I really needed to change every aspect of how I do business, right? How I, for instance, if I'm doing a workshop, then in the past, I might work with one organization at a time. But now, with my team, we're trying to put some workshops together where we're working with 100 organizations at a time. So as we scale, and I'm sure over time, once we understand how to work with 100 organizations at a time, then we'll understand how to work with 1,000 organizations at a time. But we have to continue to scale if we're indeed going to change the way business is done. Because it's my belief that businesses have far, far more capacity than they're executing right now. That people who are on teams could be far, far happier with their job than they are right now. That we can do far, far more for America, for the economy of the world, than what we're doing right now. So it's inspiring to me. It's exciting to me. I figured out how to be a solopreneur. I figured that out. I'm good. I could be a solopreneur the rest of my life, and I'd do just fine. But it's more exciting to me to grow this, and let's I heard someone say years ago. There's this guy. He died. I think back in 2009. His name was Jim Rohn, and he's a motivational speaker of such. I think he started out. He said he started out as an Idaho farm boy. And when he died, I think he had about $500 million when he died. So he did well. He did well for himself. But one of the many things he said, why not see how far you can go? I mean, why not? I mean, why not see how good you can become? Why not? And I believe that. So why not? Let's see how far we can go. Let's see how much we can do. Let's see how many organizations we can help. Why not?
Yeah, no, I love that. This conversation almost come full circle, right? Where we talk about the visionary and the operational, and oftentimes the visionary is kind of wild in the operations eyes, right? Let's change how business is done. Is the vision here? And the operations go, well, what? And then the visionary is like, yeah, you can do it. Let's make it happen. And it's almost as if I'm seeing you now sort of practice that architectural piece within your own sort of company and your own organization.
Right.
As part of that, I'm curious. This idea sort of was planted 2 years back, the way you mentioned it. You made changes along the way, which I think is kind of exciting, because to make changes is reflective of that change that you're taking to go from the current state to the future state of where you want to be. And so the question I have for you now is, as you've gone through these changes, actually, for the listeners, can you sort of share a little bit about what those changes look like for you to sort of do that? And then we'll talk about where are you butting your head against next? Like, what's in your way now?
Sure. So everything that I was doing by myself had to shift. Another thing that had to shift, for instance, is our trainings that we did. So when I entered an organization, I'd do the assessment, I'd see their team in various areas needed training. What I would do is I would train them, because this is the organization I'm working with right now. I've got the time, they're paying for it, let's do the trainings. And that became impossible as the organization grew. So what we had to do is we had to take all these trainings, all 30 trainings, and we had to put them online. We had to put them in a format that was not a Word document, but an actual training online. And that took months, right? That took months of us putting that, turning that into an actual training that people could take. Things like, I told you I created the Apex workforce assessment. And before Apex, I used to use someone else's assessment that wasn't really what I wanted, but it was available. And I was only working with one company at a time, so it didn't really matter. But then I said, well, why not create our own? Why not create our own assessment that does have everything we want in it, that is robust? So that took months, right? It's not nothing to create an assessment. So we had to create that assessment so that it would be robust enough so that it would give us the information we wanted, and it would give the person who took the assessment the information that they needed to really understand. After the assessment, we always do a 1 hour, someone on the team does a 1 hour consultation with the person who takes it. But still, it's 1 hour is good, but we also have 30 pages now to read through and see how you operate and how you work. And your boss gets that, and so now there can be a lot more work done around it, and I don't have to use someone else's to kind of fill in the blanks. The blanks are now filled in, and we can do it at a much grander scale than we were able to before. Another area, like I just talked about, is the workshops. Now we do workshops. Our goal is to do workshops with hundreds instead of one, and we're also putting together I'd like to put together the first architectural leadership conference sometime this fall. I'm actually still in conversations with a place to have that at. I live in New Jersey, And I don't live too far. I used to work at Princeton University years ago, and I don't live too far from there. So I'm looking to have it within the city of Princeton right now. So actually, I just got an email this morning that I have to follow up with. But we're hoping to do our first architectural leadership conference so that people can come there for 2.5 days and really learn all these practical ways to help their organization, ways that a lot of people just aren't thinking about. So we're going to talk about much of the stuff that we do, right? The supervisor training, the nonprofit board training, the visionary's role, the operations person's role, right? Everything that we do in architectural leadership, we'll be discussing there and helping people to understand how they need to work on their organizations and give them some very practical things. It's not we don't believe in a lot of fluff. We don't believe in simply inspiring people. We believe in giving people practical tools that they can start today on. For us, that's important.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, it sounds like you've gone through, systemic change as well in how you do your business. Instead of being one-on-one, it's now how do we do one-on-many. You wrote new books, you've systematized your trainings, you built, your own Apex work style assessment, you brought on sales and marketing to support. So lots of big changes, and I really appreciate you sort of sharing that. If we were to have, forward-looking lens, now that you are here today and you've gone through this and you've elevated, you've taken a couple of level ups in how you operate, where do you find the most bottlenecks in your current operations for your business? Is it the awareness, the marketing, the conversion, the delivery capacity? Where would you say is sort of the biggest bottleneck you experience today for foundation business?
Well, that's easy. It's really, I'd say it's one area, but it has two components. And that is the area of getting organizations to be aware of who we are. So we want them to be aware of us, but also within that awareness is the aspect of what is architectural leadership, right? So I've put a name to something that I've been doing for years, but I'll tell you, Usama, it's taken me a while for me to even understand all the aspects of architectural leadership and really what I've been doing for organizations. I saw for years that I've worked with organizations for years, and then in a year they double their revenue. So it didn't take me long to say, well, we got something here, right? This is something significant, something substantial, because organizations should not just be doubling their revenue for no reason. So what we're doing is working, but I needed to put together everything that I did, and that was one of the aspects as well that's helped me, that shifted from me being a solo to being with many, because I needed something that everyone could understand as quickly as possible, which is why I always give that house analogy, because everyone understands what an architect does. So yes, it's the awareness piece that we exist and the awareness piece of what architectural leadership is.
I appreciate you sharing that. Question for you now, as I think about this a little bit, is over the next 6 to 12 months, where do you see the biggest opportunity, or how do you sort of see, being able to move forward, and what would that look like for you to move forward in the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, what we're doing now is I just brought on board Ray, and Ray's going to help us with a few things. He's going to help us with our social media, which I really don't have any. I mean, I don't really do much of that. I'm on LinkedIn, and I do things on LinkedIn, but other than that, I don't do much. One, because I don't have a lot of time, and two, because I don't really do that. I'm not really that skilled at that. But Ray is. So he's going to help us with our social media. He's going to help us with, like you and I are talking. He can do some interviewing as well and put those things online on the website. So I need to be the face of foundations much more than I am. I need to do many more interviews. I need to, people love video much more than audio. People love video much more than reading. So we have everything we need. We have the books, we have the content, we have the experience. Now we need the awareness. So that's really our next step over the next 6 months or so, to really blast our way out there, so people understand who we are, and I think that our content is very good, right? I had someone read my latest book, The Company Beneath the Company, and he told me it was exhilarating. I said, wow, exhilarating. I said, I'd never heard that before, but I appreciate that. So I know our content is good, what we do is good, we have years and years of proof behind us, but if people don't know about us, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. This is very cool to sort of hear, you share the different components. Like I go back to visionary, architectural, and operations. And the next 6 to 8, 12 months, the way you've outlined it, I love the operational plan. I'd like to come back to that visionary piece and tie that with the architectural. And the last question I've got for you here is, you got a lot coming up for you. That's exciting. You've had quite the incredible journey so far. You've transitioned quite significantly from a small solo team to a massive team. And so the question I have for you now, and this will be the last question as we part ways, is if you had a magic wand to fix one thing that's slowing you down, and put yourself in that visionary architectural space, forget about the operational constraints. If you had a magic wand to fix one thing slowing you down for Foundations Business Consulting, what would that be?
Well, it would have to be the awareness piece. I mean, I think I'm back to that. It would have to be people understanding that we exist. I mean, I've heard the comment more than once where someone says, man, I didn't even know organizations like you existed. And that's because many organizations like us, there's not many organizations like us. Most organizations, most consulting firms are on the visionary side. But most visionaries don't need more visionary help, right? But these are the people who generally start consulting companies. So, or there are some consultants on the operation side, but far fewer than the visionary. But there's really very few people in our space. So if I had a magic wand, I would have the whole world know that we exist and what architectural leadership is.
I love that. And Ray, if you're listening, you got your marching orders, my man. Right? Amazing.
Yes.
Anthony, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. You've shown that doubling the revenue isn't really about hype. There is no magic formula. It's very systematized. It starts with clarity, structure, and then in the way you title your book, it's about building the company beneath the company. And I really appreciate you taking the time here. Before we wrap, for leaders listening who are realizing that they may be building without a blueprint, what's the best next step for them? How can they connect with you or explore your work?
Well, the next best step with us, you can do a few things. You can buy our book, The Company Beneath the Company. That's where we tell a lot of people you can get started there. It's on Amazon. But what I'd really love for you to do is to give me a call. Let's have a short conversation. I call it a clarity call, to just understand if this is for you. And when I say give me a call, I mean write me an email, right? So write me an email at anthony@foundationsbc.com. So you send me an email, we'll set up a time to talk, and we will have a conversation. And let's do a short clarity call to see, is this the right fit for you? One thing that I've learned over time is I don't have to convince everyone to be our customer. If it's not right for you, it's not right for you. Our customers are usually people who, our best customers are people who understand that they're stuck and that they need help to move forward. When I talk to people who say, everything in my business is going great, everything's fantastic, well, they're not my customer. And that's okay, and I'm glad everything's going great. But when people realize, okay, we're at a point now that we're stuck and we're not moving forward, or things are happening in our organization that we'd like to correct, then they are some of our best customers because they're willing to take the assessment. They're willing to take a look and see how we can help. So yes, please reach out. Take a look at our website, foundationsbc.com, and check out what we're doing. I'm sure that when you do, you'll see something that resonates with you, because we are not about hype. We are about solving problems.
I appreciate you sharing that. And for the leaders, for the listeners and the viewers, I'll make sure to include both the website and the email in the show description as well, so that way they've got a place to access as well. Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate that. This here brings us to the end of this episode. This podcast is sponsored by Algo AI Partners. We help consulting and service-based firms scale using smart AI solutions. If you want to book a free consultation to find out more, just click the link in the show description.